The agenda this week looked at why conspiracy theories hurt real victims of human trafficking and assessed how to make capitalism more equitable. The agenda's week in review begins with a critical eye on how Ontario's managed the COVID-19 crisis in long-term care.
Long-term care deaths account for 2/3 of the deaths from COVID-19 in this province. There are 626 long-term care homes in Ontario, of which more than 400 have had outbreaks. Now, a reminder, one case is considered an outbreak. At the start of this week, 101 homes had outbreaks. That's about 16% of the province's homes. And as of Monday of this week, there were 528 residents and 467 staff members with the virus. Now, let's start with this. The province's official line is, yes, we're into a second wave of COVID-19, but we did learn a lot of lessons the first time around, and therefore we're doing much better this time around. I want to start with a basic question. True or false? Dr. Sinha, start us off.
Well, I think, the second wave, we're seeing more deaths again, we're seeing more outbreaks, and sadly, we're seeing a lot of the issues that weren't addressed in the first wave that are creeping back to hit us again in the second wave. And I really think it's just unparalleled levels of community transmission and the staffing issues that really haven't been resolved that I think are the Achilles heel of a good pandemic response. That's why I think we're seeing outbreaks again and preventable deaths once again.
Charlene Stewart, we're doing better this time. True or false?
False. For all reasons. They didn't do enough preparedness over the summer. The things that they did were verbal commitments, but we're not seeing the actions implemented inside the homes. We're seeing a more critical staff shortage. It's been reported that 30% of the staff that were there during the first wave are not returning during the second wave. So it is worse. I mean, some of the lessons learned, like the low wages, there was a commitment to address that, but the piecemealing way that we're dealing with this pandemic is not making any improvements. Things are actually worse.
Dr. Ahmed Otter, what do you say? True or false?
Yeah, so absolutely. I would agree with the other panelists that our response has been piecemeal, ad hoc, and really far too late in many of the homes that have large-scale COVID-19 outbreaks. So really, it's false. And we could have done much better over the summer and learned even from other provinces that had a much better response.
Well, Donna Duncan, I've left you for the end for obvious reasons. I wanted you to hear what everybody else had to say first. How do you weigh in on this?
Certainly, we're better off in knowing about asymptomatic spread and PPE and testing, but we have a critical staffing shortage right now, and we still have old buildings, and we know that the root cause is in wave one, where we had community spread, old buildings, and staffing shortages. So we have a lot to do to still stabilize the sector.
Tell me what you think, Donna, has changed in terms of how long-term care homes are better prepared this time around than during the first wave. What's different now?
Certainly the response for help is much faster this time. In the first wave, it wasn't until the middle of April that we were able to get reinforcements in. Certainly we've been working with the government to say, we can't wait days, we can't wait weeks, we can't wait months. When we know that we have an outbreak that may be escalating, we need to get help as quickly as possible. And certainly working with public health and with hospitals and local communities, especially where we have large outbreaks, that helps going in more quickly. And we need that.
Samir, we know that when the Canadian military was called in earlier this year, that report really revealed some pretty horrifying stuff. In fact, I think Premier Ford said at the time it was the scariest report he'd ever seen. Heart-wrenching, I think, actually is more accurate of what he said. In your view, since then, what's changed?
There's been a greater recognition about how vulnerable long-term care homes are. And as you mentioned, that we've seen the majority now have experienced an outbreak. And we've seen over 2,300 deaths now occurring, in these settings. So this is a real challenge that we've really had to struggle with. But I think the key is that the government is making commitments. They're saying we recognize that we have to improve staffing. We recognize that we need more supports for the sector, that we have to actually increase the levels of care we're providing. The key is that, how do we actually make those structural commitments happen quickly and in a timely way, and really change the overall culture of long-term care, where we saw in that military report, staff talking about a culture of fear, staff being told by some operators, don't use the PPE, it's too expensive, for example, and a culture where staff just feel that they're not being supported. So as Charlene said, 30%, 1 in 3 of the 100,000 staff members that were working perhaps in our homes in the first wave are not returning. That's a huge problem, and that really tells us that a lot of people, the staff included, are losing confidence in the sector, and we have to change that quickly.
Charlene, how much of that happens? How much of staff being told, don't use PPE, it's too expensive, use it sparingly? How much of that do we really hear?
Yeah, unfortunately, it still does happen. And again, with the outbreaks, the ability to get a hold of higher grade like N95s is still a challenge. The infection prevention control measures in the homes, because of the crisis in the staffing, is not good enough. They've got staff working on multiple floors, using the same mask that they've used on, say, an infected floor. Because of the staffing shortages, they have to spread those staff among many floors, and that is a bad way to contain a virus or a presumed virus.
Having said that, Amit, I do remember Brian Mulroney once saying, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. So let's find out, relatively speaking, how Ontario is doing vis-a-vis other provinces. On that score, what do you find?
Well, I think really the gold standard that we can compare ourselves to is British Columbia, which acted very early on in the pandemic back in March to take critical actions. They acted decisively with clear communication for the entire long-term care sector, specifically when it came to public health supports, infection control, and prevention, along with staffing. What they did is they nationalized the long-term care sector, which means that the government actually hired all frontline long-term care workers, made sure that they were only working in one home, being paid a decent living wage, benefits, and sick leave. And consequently, through the first wave, what happened is that they have half of the long-term care sector, but had 1/10 of the deaths.
I want to read part of an open letter written by Freedom Needs Truth. This is a coalition of organizations dedicated to fighting human trafficking, and this is about the dangers of QAnon, conspiracy theories before the last election. I think most people have heard of QAnon now. Here we go. Anybody, political committee, public office holder, candidate, or media outlet who lends any credibility to QAnon conspiracies related to human trafficking actively harms the fight against human trafficking. Let's get into that. Ronelle, how do the QAnon types harm the fight against human trafficking?
Well, what QAnon does, and any sort of human trafficking conspiracy theories, is really paints a picture of what trafficking looks like. But this picture is not reflective of the reality. And so stories of international child trafficking rings or people being kidnapped off the street, and even though these things do happen, the way trafficking normally looks like, what we're seeing particularly here in Canada, so domestic sex trafficking, is that young people are being trafficked by someone that they know. It's a family member, it's a boyfriend, it's a girlfriend. It's not somebody being kidnapped off the street by a stranger, and it's not likely someone's going to be involved in an international child sex trafficking ring.
Ronelle, do you know why they do this?
Why they make up these conspiracy theories?
Yeah.
I think because, particularly with sex trafficking, it is such a complex crime. It's something that's very hard for most people to understand. How could someone be victimized in this way? And so these conspiracy theories, to me, they're trying to simplify something that is so overly complicated in a way that most people will say, okay, this is what trafficking looks like. I can get behind that.
Julia, what impact do these conspiracy organizations have on your organization?
So as we mentioned, the common myths that already exist around human trafficking are not helpful to start off with. So again, many Canadians believe that this is an issue of foreign nationals or women being brought into the country and being trafficked here. And as mentioned, that's just simply not the case. This is a domestic issue. This is a national issue. And again, like Ronelle said, this is usually happening through someone that the individuals know and trust. So when these conspiracy theories go out, what it does is it fuels that fire of myths and it really detracts from us being able to focus on the issue at hand in front of us, which again is incredibly complex.
Do you know, Lauren, why QAnon types seem to focus so much on pedophilia rings and human trafficking? This seems to be their thing.
Well, I think there's two things going on. So from the perspective of Q and those who are politically aligned with this source and promoting the conspiracy, they are just taking advantage of this to promote their political agenda, to gain support. Why it works is because in conspiracy theories in general, people are very interested in getting involved in a group that they think is involved in some kind of salvific function. They're going to save the world. They're a small group of people who have special knowledge and insight, and they're going to overcome a sort of great ignorance in the world, and they're going to rescue, particularly, the appeal is that they're going to rescue the innocent. They're going to rescue those who are being abused. So a large number of conspiracy theories or political propaganda in general usually uses motifs about women and children being raped, tortured, sexually molested, exploited, killed, etc., in order to galvanize this desire to come to the rescue of these people on the part of the audience.
Now, Julia, since this group has gained attention, in part because they endorsed Trump, in part because he retweeted some of their stuff on Twitter, have you been getting an increase in calls to your organization because of that?
So usually about 48 hours after a new hashtag comes out, like Save the Children or some of the conspiracy theories around Wayfair, we will get an influx in calls to the hotline. Luckily, we're not experiencing to the same degree as they are in the States with their anti-human trafficking hotline. So it's not actually disrupting our ability to serve other folks who might be victims or survivors on the ground. But we definitely see it. And in all honesty, we take it as an opportunity to share education and awareness about what human trafficking really is. But we definitely get people from across Canada, family members and just general folks, asking if this is real.
One of the points your book makes is that this is obviously unfair in terms of economic performance, but it's also, you suggest, a problem for democracy. How so?
Well, if you think about it, that great middle class that's sort of the underpinning of every advanced democratic capitalist country also happens to be the swing voter. Right? If you think about the median family, the 50th percentile, in some sense, the government in power needs to have that voter on its side, or at least the voters in that narrow band around it. And if suddenly that narrow band has stopped advancing, they may fundamentally ask, hey, why am I continuing to vote for the continuation of this thing that isn't working for me, isn't working for my family anymore? And if that happens, you'll have an electorate saying, well, maybe we'll try something else. It happened, in the Great Depression, right? In the Great Depression, which was a worldwide phenomenon in advanced countries around the world, much of Europe, much of the Far East went either fascist, socialist, or communist during that period. So when you have a middle class that says this isn't working for us anymore, they're prone to try other things.
Well, okay, but the conventional wisdom has always been, yeah, but that could never happen over here. The terrible recession of the 1980s didn't result in a change of style of government. The Great Recession of 15 years ago didn't result in a change of style of government. Here we are again with the economic dislocation caused by COVID. We don't see people, clamoring in the streets for a change of, I don't mean a change of party. I mean like literally a change in the system by which we are governed. Are you concerned that could no longer be the case?
Yeah, and I think, Steve, if you look at the polls that question people how about socialism, they have higher favorability than ever before in America, and it ain't even close. So I think it's upon us, to be honest.
There's a lot more financial mobility in Scandinavia than there is over in North America. Is that the point?
Considerably more financial mobility and even more social mobility, which is sort of blows up that myth that the U.S. has always lived on, that they have the best mobility and the easiest path for every citizen to become wealthy. That hasn't been true for a long time.
Michael, you wanted to follow up?
Well, I think that's a good point Brian makes about intergenerational mobility. In fact, it's significantly higher in Canada than the United States as well.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask our director here, Sheldon Osmond, to put up a graph, and then Shannon, I'll get you to speak to it first. This is essentially, was tweeted out by the Financial Times back on November 17th. And essentially, again, I'm going to describe this a bit for people who can't see it and who are listening on podcast. It seems that the older you are, the more you are satisfied with democracy. So if we go to the top right corner of this graph, you see a blue squiggly line there, the interwar generation, 1918 to 1943, high levels of satisfaction. Baby boomers are the next ones down, 1944 to 64. Again, pretty decent level of satisfaction with the way democracy works. But then we get into younger groups. Generation X, 1965 to 1980, less and less satisfaction. And the millennials, born 1981 to 1996, considerable dissatisfaction with the way society works. Shannon, I guess I want to know from you, do you believe, based on your interactions with this generation, that they, it's legitimate for them to feel that way?
It's a great question. I think everyone loves the idea of critical thought in a democracy, but I think specifically to democratic capitalism, this was even mentioned in the interview, that something is not working. So people are being left behind, and the younger generation is feeling that polarization of the wealthy getting wealthy and the monopolies that have been created with big, huge, massive corporations. And they're feeling like they don't have the same hope. They're not going to do better than their parents' generation, which is this massive shift that's happened. And so I do agree that the younger generations, and even into Gen X and the conversations that I'm having on the front line of financial planning, there is a disillusionment with the current system. And to the interviewer's point, when people are disillusioned and things become polarized, people want to try new things. And I think that I agree with that. And I hear it often, all the time. And people are nervous about the future.
Brian, can I get you to react to that tweet that we put up a while ago, that the older you are, the more satisfied you are with the way democracy works? The younger you are, the less satisfied you are. How concerned should we all be about those numbers?
Well, I think the numbers are accurate. I think if you talk to anybody these days in their 20s, especially if they've just come out of university in the middle of this pandemic, they have real concerns about how they're going to manage, and their incomes are uncertain. Their job prospects are really uncertain these days, and they are disillusioned because they were promised something better many years ago. But I think it's also true that older people who are happier with democratic capitalism are older people who are pretty well off. If you go to older poor people, they're just as miserable as everybody in the younger set. So I don't think it's widely true.
That's just some of what we covered this week on The Agenda. For more, including the full conversations, you can visit our website, tvo.org, our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, or our Twitter feed, twitter.com/theagenda.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.